It's March 22nd, 2013. The cameras are rolling on the first day of filming for season 13 of Koh Lanta, France's most watched reality show. The location is Koh Rong, a remote island off the coast of Cambodia, where the weather is brutal, pushing 40 degrees Celsius or just over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The first challenge has just begun, a tug of war between two tribes on the beach, and the contestants are giving everything they have. But then suddenly, one of them stops. He lets go of the rope and collapses. What those cameras captured has never been released and likely no longer exists. And the question of why is more complicated than it should be. Koh Lanta has been one of the biggest shows on French television since it first aired in 2001. It's the French version of Survivor, hosted by Denis Brogniart, and the format is exactly what you'd expect. Contestants are dropped into a remote location with almost nothing, split into two tribes, and forced to survive while competing in challenges. Every few days, someone gets voted out until one person is left and walks away with 100,000 euros. It airs on TF1, France's most watched channel, and by season 12, it was pulling in around 7.4 million viewers an episode. The show was gearing up for its 13th season, which was set to film on the island of Koh Rong. One of the contestants was Gérald Babin. He was 25 years old at the time and was born in Fort-de-France, Martinique, and was living in Villejuif just south of Paris with his girlfriend. He trained regularly for several hours a week and had the physique to show for it. The previous summer, he'd visited his grandmother back in Martinique and told her that competing on Koh Lanta was something he'd always wanted to do. And after passing a full series of medical examinations to determine he was fit enough to be on the show, he became one of the contestants for the series' 13th season. Filming began on the morning of March 22nd, 2013. The first challenge was a tug-of-war between the two tribes, part of what the show called the shipwreck event, where contestants swim from a boat to shore before competing. It was a format the show had used before, so nobody on that crew were expecting anything to go wrong. But unfortunately, it couldn't have gone worse. During the tug-of-war, Babin stopped. He let go of the rope and grabbed his arm, complaining of severe cramps. Dr. Thierry Costa, the show's on-site physician who had worked on Koh Lanta for 4 seasons, came to his aid and concluded he was suffering from the effects of dehydration and the heat. It seemed manageable at the time, but it quickly turned out to be much more severe. Babin suffered his first cardiac arrest on the beach. He was resuscitated, and a decision was made to transfer him to Sihanoukville Hospital. During the journey, his heart stopped again. He was resuscitated a second time, and shortly after arriving at the hospital, he suffered a third cardiac arrest. This time, they were unable to save him. Gérald Babin was pronounced dead at just 25 years old during the season's first day of filming. Almost immediately, TF1 and the production company, ALP, put out a statement. According to them, Dr. Costa had attended to Gérald straight away. Everything had been handled correctly, and what happened was simply a tragedy nobody could have predicted. But soon after, another version of events came out. An eyewitness who worked for ALP spoke to the French outlet Arrêt-sur-Image and gave a completely different account. According to them, Gérald had already been struggling with the heat before he collapsed. And when he went down, the production crew told Dr. Costa he couldn't step in until the challenge had finished. So while Gérald was on the ground, still conscious, still calling out for help, and still audible to everyone around him, the challenge continued. The delay in him receiving any medical aid was at least 10 minutes. Then, when the decision was made to get him to the hospital, the eyewitness said that the production crew decided to move Gérald by boat first, rather than a helicopter, as it was cheaper to do so. It was during the boat journey that Gérald lost consciousness again, and it was only then that an airlift was finally requested. But there was another problem. Nobody on the crew had the helicopter pilot's phone number, and there were no functioning walkie-talkies to reach him. It took nearly 2 hours from the moment Gérald first collapsed to him being airlifted to Sihanoukville. The eyewitness also claimed that Dr. Costa was ordered to reenact his initial intervention for the cameras. ALP denied everything and announced they were taking legal action against the whistleblower and any media outlet that repeated the claims. But a second anonymous source came forward and backed it all up, confirming the delay, confirming the dehydration misdiagnosis, and confirming the problems reaching the pilot. And even the helicopter company's own manager confirmed they'd been called to collect Gerald not from the beach, but from a boat. But just 10 days later, the situation worsened. On April 1st, 2013, Dr. Thierry Costa was found dead in his hotel room in Cambodia. He'd taken his own life by injecting a lethal dose of surgical general anesthetic. He left a handwritten note on hotel stationery, which he specifically asked to be made public. Part of the note read, "My name has been sullied in the media. In the 20 years since I started in medicine, I have always worked hard and respected my patients, with a love for medicine and according to the Hippocratic Oath. Today, I feel that all these efforts have been destroyed by untrue articles. I can never look anyone in the eye in France without wondering if they were full of distrust." A formal criminal investigation was opened by French prosecutors in July 2013, with both TF1 and ALP under scrutiny over their handling of Gerald's medical care. At the same time, an autopsy revealed something that nobody had known going into the season. Gerald had a pre-existing heart condition called dilated cardiomyopathy, which causes the left ventricle of the heart to enlarge, restricting the muscle wall and preventing the heart from pumping blood properly. A medical expert later said the condition should have been detectable by an electrocardiogram and an ultrasound scan, both of which Koh Lanta's medical process was supposed to include. Then there were other eyewitness accounts. A nurse who was on the scene told French radio that Dr. Costa had arrived immediately and acted professionally, and that there were no early signs of cardiac arrest, and a fellow contestant backed her up. But a witness inside the show's control room said the medical intervention had been delayed during filming. By April 2015, after nearly 2 years of investigation, TF1 and ALP were fully acquitted. Gerald's family had already reached a separate settlement the previous year, receiving several million euros in compensation. In the days after Gerald's death, TF1 and ALP announced that season 13 was cancelled and the other contestants were flown back to Paris. The show had told them they'd get another chance in a future season, but that never happened. Koh Lanta came back in September 2014, but under an all-star format with none of the season 13 cast. ALP expanded its on-site medical crew for future seasons, and the show moved on like nothing happened. As for the footage itself, there's no confirmation as to whether it still exists or not. 10 cameras were rolling on that beach on March 22, 2013, and they captured everything. That footage was handed to investigators and used during the criminal investigation. But Gerald's family lawyer, Jérémy Assou, said the footage shown in court in the early stages of the investigation stopped before the medical intervention. He believed the full footage existed and demanded it be handed over, warning that if any of it had been destroyed, he'd be pursuing criminal proceedings. But none of it has ever been released. Whether it still exists in full is still unknown. And with TF1 and ALP fully acquitted, there's nothing left that could force it into the open. It's the 3rd of February 1998. In the small ski resort town of Cavalese in the Italian Dolomites, a yellow cable car is making its way down from the summit of Mount Cermis. There are 20 people on board, skiers mostly, heading back down into the valley after a day on the slopes. The mountains are quiet, the weather is clear, and it just felt like any other day. Then, coming in low over the valley at close to 540 miles per hour, a United States Marine Corps jet cuts through the air beneath them. What happened in the seconds that followed would become one of the most controversial military incidents in recent Italian history, and the full story of what occurred that day has never been seen by the public. The aircraft involved was a US Marine Corps EA-6B Prowler, an electronic warfare jet based at Aviano Air Base in northern Italy. It was on a low-altitude training mission designed to simulate real wartime conditions and flying low enough to avoid radar detection. And the regulations were clear. Flights in the Cavalese region were restricted to a minimum of 2,000 feet, while general military regulations required at least 1,000 feet. Those restrictions existed for a reason. 2 years earlier, a prowler had crashed during a training exercise in Yuma, Arizona, killing all 4 crew members on board. On February 3, 1998, the aircraft was flying at around 260 to 330 feet above the ground in a narrow valley between mountains. It was traveling at around 540 miles per hour, close to the aircraft's top speed. Locals in the area had been complaining about American jets flying too low for years, spooking livestock, rattling rooftops, and skimming over farms and roads. But this day would prove much more disturbing. The crew had taken a daredevil route that included a low pass over Lake Garda before heading northeast into the Val di Fiemme Valley. The issue, though, was that this narrow mountain valley was home to one of the area's busiest ski resorts. At 3:12 p.m, Captain Ashby spotted the cable car to his right. It was bright yellow and clearly visible against the mountains. He banked sharply left and upward in an attempt to avoid it, but he was too late. The right wing of the prowler sliced clean through the 2-inch cable supporting the car, sending it plummeting 260 feet to the ground. All 20 people on board were killed instantly. The plane suffered severe damage to its right wing and tail, leaking fuel and hydraulic fluid. Despite this, Ashby managed to get it back to Aviano Air Base for an emergency landing. The other 2 crew members, Seagraves and Rainey, followed military protocol and headed straight for the hangar. But when they looked back, they noticed Ashby and Schweitzer were still sitting in the cockpit of the damaged, leaking aircraft, and they weren't moving. A plane in that condition could have caught fire at any moment, but Schweitzer wasn't fazed at all. His focus was on removing a videotape from a camera placed in the cockpit and replacing it with a fresh one. Whatever was on that tape, he wasn't prepared to let anyone else see it. In the aftermath, all 4 crew members were charged, but it was only Ashby and his navigator Schweitzer who actually went to trial, facing 20 counts of involuntary manslaughter and negligent homicide. And crucially, the Americans had made sure that trial would take place in the States at Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, something that didn't go down well in Italy. The defense argued that the maps the crew had been given by the US military didn't show the cable wires, that Ashby had no idea there were speed restrictions, and that the plane's altimeter had malfunctioned. Ashby even said he'd thought the cable car was an optical illusion. But the Independent Investigation Board said otherwise, finding that the crew had been aggressively maneuvering the aircraft, going off course, and flying at close to the plane's top speed. On March 5, 1999, after a trial lasting just 14 days, Ashby was acquitted on all counts, and Schweitzer's charges were dropped shortly after. In Italy, people were outraged. Lawyers for the victims' families said there was no justice in the world. Italian politicians were equally furious, and they had every right to be. But here's where the story gets even darker. During the investigation, it emerged that a video camera had been set up in the front cockpit of the prowler, which was itself against regulations. When investigators went to examine the footage, all they found was black. And that's because it was the same tape that Schweitzer had been seen swapping out in the cockpit immediately after landing, while the damaged, fuel-leaking plane could have gone up at any moment. Ashby and Schweitzer's explanation was that the camera had been there to film the scenery, and that the footage showed Schweitzer smiling before the accident. He said he destroyed it because he was worried television networks would broadcast images of him smiling alongside footage of the disaster's aftermath. His story was that he threw it onto a bonfire after landing at Aviano. This led to a second trial, where prosecutors argued something different. They said the tape had been destroyed to obstruct the investigation, and that it almost certainly showed exactly how low and fast the plane had been flying at the moment it hit the cable. Given that the entire defense had rested on the altimeter being faulty, and Ashby being unaware of the speed, footage showing otherwise would have changed everything. Ashby and Schweitzer were charged with obstruction of justice, and this time, both were found guilty. Ashby was sentenced to 6 months in prison, dismissed from the Marines, and stripped of all his military pay and allowances. Schweitzer entered a plea agreement, avoided prison time, but was also dismissed. Both appealed their dismissals, and both appeals were rejected in November 2007. 20 people died on that mountain because 2 pilots decided to fly hundreds of feet below the regulated altitude through a narrow valley for fun, and nobody was ever convicted of killing them. The only punishment either man received was for getting rid of the tape. Schweitzer described that footage as an innocent record of a happy flight, and maybe it was meant to be just that. But that camera was running when the right wing of that plane sliced through the cable. Whatever was on that tape, whether it was just 2 men smiling at the scenery, or whether it captured the moment 20 people fell out of the sky, there's just no way of knowing. And there never will be. It was the evening of May 19th, 1971. In the quiet suburb of Aldridge in Walsall, England, a man and his wife have come to visit a family they know on Sandra Close. They'd been told that the wife of the household was finally coming home from hospital after several weeks away, and they'd come to welcome her back. But something felt off the moment they arrived. The family car was parked inside the garage, which was unusual. The man of the house always kept it out on the forecourt, where people could see it. He never put it away. A doctor from nearby offered to help them by climbing a ladder to reach an open window on the upper floor. The moment he got inside, he was hit by a smell that told him everything he needed to know before he'd even seen a thing. What police found in that house that evening was one of the most disturbing domestic scenes they'd ever encountered in that part of England, and somewhere amongst it all was a pocket tape recorder left behind with a message. It was a confession. The confession came from a man called Raymond Cooper. He was 43 years old and told people he was a travelling salesman, though in reality he worked as a clerk at the local Walsall post office. Neighbours said he had a habit of making himself sound more impressive than he was. His wife Irene was 40 and 3 months pregnant. Their daughter Anita was 9 and was doing well at school and was well liked by those around her. They'd lived on Sandra Close in Aldridge since 1965, and as far as anyone could tell, their life was pretty normal. But one day, on April 10th, 1971, Irene vanished. Her best friend, Vanda Emery, met her that day and noticed straight away that something was wrong. Irene was distressed. Her doctors had recommended she have an abortion, and there were money troubles too, with Raymond having lost earnings during a recent postal strike. 2 weeks later, Emery called the house to offer financial help. Raymond answered and told her Irene was in hospital. Then he called back to say she was recovering in a private clinic in Shrewsbury and would soon be having a £300 operation. He told Raymond's post office colleagues something different entirely, that Irene had been killed in a road accident in Bedfordshire. He also later told a credit agent who came to the door that his wife had scattered off with his money. For the next 6 weeks, Raymond Cooper went about his life as if nothing had happened. He went to his local pub, he played the fruit machines, and he sent Anita to school every morning. Anyone who asked about his wife was told she was recovering and would be home soon. But this wasn't true. And soon after, on May 17th, he took Anita to the pub with him. That was the last time anyone outside that house saw her alive. On the evening of May 19th, Brian Maybury and his wife arrived at Sandra Close, expecting to find Irene home. Instead, they found Raymond's car parked inside the garage. This on its own was weird enough, as Raymond was known for keeping that car on the forecourt, polished and on show. Dr. Percival Carpenter, who lived nearby, helped Brian climb a ladder to reach an open window on the upper floor, but the smell hit him before he'd even got inside properly. He knew immediately that something was very wrong. Police Constable Ian Barnes arrived and searched the house. In Anita's bedroom, he found her lying lifeless in her bed, clutching a teddy bear. In the adjacent room, he found Raymond, a plastic bag over his head, a hosepipe running from it down through the house to the gas fire in the living room below. Then police broke through to the master bedroom. The wardrobe had been sealed, and when they forced it open, they found Irene. Her body had been wrapped in plastic sheets and tied with 9 neckties. A towel had been placed over her head, and pillow slips covered her stomach. There were air fresheners positioned around the wardrobe. She had been dead for nearly 6 weeks. Among Raymond's belongings, police found a pocket tape recorder. On it was a message he'd recorded before he died, a confession. While the full tape has never been publicly released, fragments of it were published across several West Midlands newspapers at the time, and when combined, they give us a picture of what Raymond said in those final hours. This is Raymond Cooper speaking about his wife, who he has killed because she had a child by another man. I killed Irene 4 weeks ago tonight. I strangled Irene with my bare hands. It was not premeditated. Well, premeditated by a matter of seconds, and she fought back. My hands ached for 2 days after this. I have told myself inexcusable lies to cover myself because I am a coward. I can't make any excuse for what I've done. I have wanted a happy life, but I haven't had one. It's been 20 wasted years. My mind is as clear now as it ever was. I don't regret one thing, except I regret her coming back to me once she'd left. This is what caused the trouble. But my daughter, she is the one thing I have lived for. Then Irene, to come with this, and then to leave her. When she came back, my God, I saw red. Had she stayed away, none of this would have happened. She tempted fate far too much. I must take Anita with me when I end it all. I have tried to make her happy these last few weeks, but I'm living in turmoil. I shall not let her feel any pain, but I can't leave her to face the world having a murderer for a father. This, I know, she could not live with. To do this thing to Anita, I've had to drink. I have pains in my head. I can't make any excuse for what I have done. I've taken a life. I should have controlled my temper more, but since I haven't, I must pay. Detective Inspector Percy G. looked at Raymond's claims and called them exactly what they were, a pure fabrication and a tissue of lies. He said Irene was a faithful wife. She'd never left her husband and had never been with anyone else. Vanda Emery, her closest friend, said the same thing. There was never anyone else for Irene. What G found instead was a man drowning in debt, lying to everyone around him, and who had spent 6 weeks pretending his wife was in hospital, while her body was in the wardrobe upstairs. The inquest jury agreed. They ruled that Raymond had strangled Irene, gassed Anita, and then took his own life. As for why he really did it, the tape never actually tells us, and it never will. Fragments of the transcript made it into a handful of West Midlands newspapers at the time of the inquest, and it's from those that we have what we have. But the complete recording, if it still exists, is almost certainly sitting in the British court system somewhere, and the chances of it ever coming out are pretty much zero. Outside of those newspaper clippings, this case has been almost entirely forgotten. Most people have never heard of Raymond Cooper or what he did to his family in that house on Sandra Close in 1971. But somewhere, if the tape hasn't deteriorated beyond recognition, is a recording of a man explaining in his own words why he strangled his pregnant wife, hid her body in a wardrobe for 6 weeks, and gassed his 9-year-old daughter to death while she slept. Whatever Raymond's real reasons were, he took them with him, and the one thing that might have told us more is the one thing nobody is ever going to hear.